Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I'm here today with Lisa Salisbury. Lisa Salisbury is a health and weight loss life coach for women who want to lose weight without counting and calculating their food. As a former chronic dieter, Lisa knows what it's like to be all consumed with everything that goes into your mouth. It was only when she learned the tools and skills through coaching that she was able to drop the dieting obsession and drop her weight. Lisa is a certified health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition and a certified life coach and weight loss coach through the Life Coach School. She also has a BS from Brigham Young University in Health and Human Performance. She takes her clients through a 12-week program designed to help them eat well, think well, and live well. When you learn the skill of paying attention to your body and losing weight, you'll be surprised at how it translates into other areas of life. Craving chocolate and craving more Instagram, same solutions. Avoiding vegetables, protein, and avoiding your to-do list, same solutions. You can hear many of these tools on her podcast, Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. Lisa's philosophy: I believe diets with end dates are just about the worst thing you can do to your mind and body. I teach a way of eating that will be long-term, sustainable practice. I believe attaching moral judgments to food by labeling them good or bad is harmful, especially because we label ourselves similarly for eating those foods. I believe the key to health and weight management is to pick power foods, just 80 to 90% of the time. No foods are off limits in my program. I believe that movement is an important aspect of a healthy lifestyle. I believe that loving your body right now is the most beautiful path to change. Today, we talked about giving up the Clean Plate Club, portion distortion, and how it affects our ability to decide how much food we eat, dropping the mental gymnastics around wasting food, higher brain versus lower brain when it comes to making food and health choices, and just getting over the binging and restricting cycle, as well as understanding food is not for entertainment and making things more of a lifestyle so it's sustainable. This was a great episode, a lot of fresh new perspective. And I like getting other people's perspective, which is not always the same as my perspective. So it's good to have a variety for everyone out there because we're all so different. I hope you enjoy this episode with Lisa. And without further ado, we're going to dive into this episode. I hope you enjoy it. I'm excited to welcome Lisa Salisbury to the Sisterhood of Sweat.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Well, we discovered during our pre-talk before we started the show that Lisa went to the same institute I did, IIN, Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and there's a lot of great graduates that have come from that school and went on to be very successful in the health and wellness space. And so I found it to be a catalyst to really just springboarding to everything that I've done since. And I think whatever we do in life, it's really what we bring to it and what we make out of it, and using the things that we learn and then making like our own interpretations in our own path, being original. And Lisa, you were talking about, you went to IIN, that you had been on the diet circus train, like crazy making. I want the audience to kind of get a picture of where you were at when you were basically on the diet and then off the diet. If you could just kind of jump into that whole train of events.
Sure. Yeah. So I consider myself a recovered chronic dieter because I did do what feels like every diet under the sun. At IIN, as you know, there was a diet database so that we could understand where our clients were coming from and, get them off of those things. And as I was looking through that list, I was like, I've done that one. I've done that one. Oh, I've done that one too. Um, but I was telling Linda at the beginning that a lot of my dieting started in my years of pregnancy because I started dieting in high school, but then I got married pretty young and I had 4 children. And so it was on again, off again with the dieting. I would get pregnant and I would be like, okay, good. Like I could quote, relax, like, oh, I can eat whatever I want now because it's okay. And then I would get off or I would have the baby and it was like, okay, I got to get this weight off. And so I just was constantly going on diets and then getting pregnant and feeling like I could relax again. And it really set me up for a couple decades then of just that sort of like never quite figuring out what was going to work for my body. And when I was going to IIN, I was actually doing macro counting, which I know works for a lot of people. And a lot of people like the kind of the video game aspect of like making it all fit. And that's really fun for them. For me and my personality, it did not work for me. I became extremely obsessive. I got very anxious when I would go to restaurants and I couldn't figure out the macros. If they just had a calorie count, I was like, well, what am I going to do now? How do I know how many protein grams? And so it was very stressful, produced a lot of anxiety. And my study partner at IIN, when we were going over the eating disorders unit and we were talking about orthorexia, which is that way of disordered eating where you're obsessed with eating healthy. And she just like was so sweet. And she just like gently looks at me and she's like, oh, like, do you notice anything here? And I was like, what? And
Yeah,
so like,
of
I
course.
thought because, I was using the whole, like, it can, if it fits, that I was eating whatever I wanted, except for that I really wasn't because I was eating lunch meat from the refrigerator to try to meet my protein macros. It was making me crazy. And so for me, that was kind of the last straw. And she really helped me. And then, of course, IIN as well, just the teachings there helped me to start eating by listening to my body and by just deciding for myself. And I always say, I teach you to check in with your body, not a diet app. I don't need to ask the app if I should eat more. I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to ask the scale, my food scale that I used to bring to the kitchen table with my daughters at the table. I don't need to ask it anymore what my portion is. I am able to check in with my body.
Yeah, and I love that intuitive eating and paying attention to what message we're actually getting from our body. But even further than that, I personally think that that's a whole disordered way of eating, and that it should be more like the food should be, to me, it should be enjoyable, but it isn't it's not entertainment, and it's not a method for like when I'm bored, or or reward. Like, I think about food as I want to be healthy, and so what are the best foods I can eat for my health and to take care of myself and to, I guess, like, give my body fuel. And and really, to me, it's really a lifestyle, and that's
For
where you
sure.
win. It's when we think we're depriving ourselves if we don't have um hot fudge cake, or something that's laden with vegetable shortening. Like, if you really
Mhm.
know like what's in your food, and it's not good for you, like, you
Yeah.
want to think about it more like, how can I take the best care of me? Um,
Yes.
and that's,
Because when people say like, well, I just want to be able to eat whatever I want, and they think whatever they want means, chocolate fudge cake. But when you really say, yeah, that you totally can eat that when you give yourself the permission, and then you decide, but what do I want for my body right now? you actually settle in to a pattern of eating, and like you said, a lifestyle that actually serves you. Because if you eat chocolate cake 3 times a day, you actually won't have the energy and the stamina to work, to exercise, to take care of your kids. Like you won't function. And so it's that when we talk about eating whatever we want, I actually want to eat fruits and vegetables. Like I really do, because that's what gives me the proper energy.
And I recently had an experience which was different from any other that I've had uh, through years of doing fitness competitions. I've really had injuries, and so I really put it on the
Mm-hmm.
shelf. After 3 horrific injuries, I just put the competing on the shelf because I was like, obviously my body is not liking this at, you know, at the time it was 58. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not liking these explosive movements where I'm flying through
Mm-hmm.
the air and jumping in the splits. So I'm going to shelf that, let my body build back up and get in better shape, and look at what other sides of myself I could look at and see what else is there.
Mm-hmm.
And I of course, when I was so injured, there was the weight gain because I had to be sedentary. I was still eating very healthy,
Mm-hmm.
but then I just had this whole journey, and it was different than any other. It was really just about building my body up, giving my body what it needed, uh, listening to it, taking the time, taking the rest, honoring my body, realizing I was more than my body. And
Mm-hmm.
then it all came back. And I wasn't even preparing for a competition. I would never do a competition in the past that I didn't prep at least 16 weeks for, 22 if I was wanting to do well. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I think I could just do a show. I feel like I could just go do this show that's coming up. And I did. And I look at that and I look at the pictures and I'm like, glowing health,
Mm. Yeah.
happiness, glowing health. Wow, I think I was a winner. I was a winner in that whole department. And when I look at it, I never went to any crazy extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that it was more like, what does my body need? Like listening to my body. And I think we can get in these arenas where we either over exercise,
Mm-hmm.
like, because I was overtraining is probably why I got injuries. So overtrain, count these macros,
Yeah.
get
Over obsess.
over obsess,
Mm-hmm.
get focused on all the wrong things. And so I feel like it's a conversation to be had. Like, what are you really actually want at the end of the day? And what are you really actually trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a lot of people honestly just want to, I hear clients say, I just want to eat like a normal person, which what they mean is they want to eat like a naturally thin person. They want to eat like someone who isn't overly obsessed with food, the kind of person that enjoys going out to dinner and enjoys what they're eating, but they don't eat for entertainment. They don't eat that food isn't their entertainer, their compensator, and their comforter, which is always what I'm thinking. Like if
Or
food
their
is your
fun time.
comfort, yeah. Or you're like compensating for something that you didn't get, or like that's not food's job, right? It's okay to enjoy food. I want to get a little dopamine hit from my food. I want for my body to say, yeah, that's good. You should do that again when I have like chicken and rice and broccoli and salmon and all those good things. I want for my body to enjoy it so that I want to eat it again, but I don't eat food as my only source of entertainment and comfort.
And I love that you said entertainment, because a lot of times clients will say, I'm going out and I want to be able to have fun with my friends. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to say they're equating eating all this food to fun. And really, the truth is, it's not very fun if I eat everything I want and then I'm unhappy with myself at the end of the day and getting this vicious cycle of beating myself up. That's not very
Mhm.
fun.
Right.
But fun, I mean, why is food considered your fun? Just thinking about it, it should be getting with your friends, going out. And why can't be eating something that's really healthy and good for you be fun? Like, I
Mhm.
mean, because it isn't necessarily healthy to eat a ton of junk or fried food or, something laden with white flour, and just all that stuff. Like,
Mhm.
I think it's the way we're conceptualizing and thinking about our food. And if we really sat and thought about it, it's fun to be healthy. It's fun to feel good.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I want to live a long time. I want to be an influence for good on my future grandchildren that aren't here in the world yet, but I plan to be here when they are, and I plan to be there at their high school graduations and at their weddings, like, because that, to me, that's fun. That's fun to be able to be an influence for good on those people that I love. And when we go out with friends, we're not only there for the food, we're really there as a way to spend time with them. And I always say, like, more overeating of food doesn't make it taste better. The more we overeat past our comfortable fullness, our experience of that actually decreases, because what's happening is we end up getting more and more uncomfortable in our body. And then we end up punching ourselves in the face mentally for overeating yet again, right? How many times do we come home from an evening out and be like, oh, I promised myself I wouldn't do that again. And then your body feels terrible because you overate. And then your brain and the rest of you feels terrible because you're metaphorically punching yourself in the face about it. Like, let's not do that. Right. So the first step is just to say, like, okay, yeah, I did do that. And I'm going to take it easy on myself so that next time I can make a different decision. And I think that's just so important. And just to remember that truly more of that food is not going to make it more delicious. I promise. It's actually going to decrease your enjoyment of the entire evening if you overeat.
Yeah, and I always feel better if I've ordered something that's good for me. Like, to me, I still got the whole eating out experience with everyone,
Yeah,
but
you still didn't have to do dishes.
I didn't have to do dishes. I got good conversation. I'm out of my house. I'm having somebody cooked, for me. And at the end of the day, I feel good. I don't go home like, oh my gosh, I wish I wouldn't have ate that. Oh, I wish I wouldn't have drank that, because it's almost like a self-sabotaging behavior. But let's go on. Let's talk about giving up the clean plate club. Like, I
Mm,
think, as reading your notes, that you were raised in a way I was raised, which is you clean your plate.
absolutely. And so many of us in this generation are, and it's so interesting that we all use that phrase collectively. I've always told my clients, like, I'm taking away your membership card. Like, it's not even a cool club. You don't get your picture in the yearbook. Like, ha ha ha. And then I started actually doing some research on it. No, it actually was a real club in elementary schools in the 40s. So the Clean Plate Club started as a government program
I
in World
believe
War
that.
One. Yeah, as a government program in World War One, established in elementary schools because of rations. And the idea was, and of course, back then, you're the school cafeteria, they were cooking things from scratch and they would serve you. And so it wasn't just a prepackaged item, like there was a portion amount. So the idea was you take just what you need and you clean your plate to show that you didn't take more than what you need for your body, because we need to conserve food for the war effort. Totally valid, right? The problem is that's our grandparents. And then it revived again in the 40s for World War II. So then it's our parents for those of us, who grew up in the 80s. This is about the right generation. So it's very likely that your parents or grandparents were actual members of the Clean Plate Club in their elementary schools. So it's no wonder that in the 80s, we were told, clean your plate, there's starving children in Africa.
Oh my
Because,
gosh, you just took the thoughts right out of my mind.
right? Because they were told, clean your plate, there's starving children in Europe. And so, of course, that's what they did. And like, no, no shade to my parents. I had great parents. It wasn't their fault. It was part of their primary programming. I just can decide, hey, I don't need to live by that anymore. The main problem is that in the 80s, it wasn't that difficult to clean our plates from the portions we were given. Because, for example, bagels, I just happen to know this one off the top of my head. Bagels were 3 inches across in the 80s, and now they're 6 inches across. So cleaning your plate in the 80s, before there was supersized menus and before it was like all this like food porn, food coma, eat as much as you can mentality, the portions back then were much smaller. So cleaning your plate in the 80s is actually a whole different game than cleaning your plate now, because our portions are just so much bigger. And so when you combine those two things, the idea from our childhood that we should clean our plate, and then we look at the portions we're being served now. And here's another one, interestingly, even in classic cookbooks, so say like The Joy of Cooking, which has several editions over the decades, the same exact brownie recipe in the 80s served 16. Now that brownie recipe serves 9 in the same exact pan. So even when we're cooking at home, we're reflecting
We're eating too much.
Yes, we're reflecting what's happening out in the restaurant world portions. Plus, we're getting roughly, most Americans get about half their calories from eating out. So we see these portions out in restaurants so often that then we're reflecting those same portions on our plates at home, even when we're cooking from home. And so we have two choices. We can give up the Clean Plate Club and stop finishing our plates, both at home and at restaurants. Or we can start cutting those things in half, depending on where you're at. A lot of times a restaurant portion is about twice too big for me. And I mean, I'm a woman in my late 40s. So obviously everyone's energy needs are different. Your energy needs are going to be different day to day, but you can start with that. You can start with about cutting it in half and just checking in with your body and seeing if that's the right amount for you. But we want to just start practicing dishing up less at home, because we just don't want to reflect the portions that we're being given in restaurants with what we're eating at home, because it's really messing with our brains, really, the portion. And then we're like, well, I don't want to waste food. Do you worry about wasting food?
So I used to. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, if I made something and nobody liked it, I felt like I had to eat it.
Right. Someone's got to eat
but
it.
I finally got over that. I unhooked from that. And if I have something that nobody likes, it's out. I throw it out or give it to, I just don't keep it. I have gotten over the whole thing of it's still a little bit, but the wasting, like I'm like, I don't want to wear it around my waist. So
there you go. Yeah. Yeah, because we're either going to throw it in the trash and waste it that way. Like if we've dished up too much or we made something we didn't like or leftovers just didn't get eaten, like we're going to waste it in the trash, or we're going to waste the time, energy, and mental effort of getting it off our body. It's a waste either way.
There you go. Oh, I love that. And also I had the guilt feelings of, well,
right.
Nobody's eating it, like I had to eat it. Like that's messed up, right?
Yeah. So many women end up being like the garbage disposal for the family. They, instead of making their own proper lunch, they're just like, well, I'll just eat the kids' leftovers. And so you eat 6 bites of mac and cheese and 2 chicken nuggets and a few grapes. Like that's not a balanced meal for you. And you are worth making a proper meal for yourself. And it's not your job to clean up after the family. It's not your job to eat leftovers nobody wants. And it's not your job to clean your plate. It just isn't.
So good. So good. So how do we drop the mental gymnastics then around wasting food?
Yeah, I one of the things I like for my clients to do, honestly, is just practice. So the first thing I have them do is just leave 2 bites behind at every meal. It's not going to be enough that you're going to be hungry. You're not like, don't worry about hunger. It's 2 bites. But practicing looking at food on your plate and not finishing, it actually it takes a lot of times my clients are like, I couldn't do it. I had to finish. Like we're just in such a habit of cleaning our plates that just practicing with 2 bites behind. So that's like just an action you can do, what I call in my A line, the action line. But in your thought lines, you just want to practice thoughts like wasting food is okay. And I know that sounds simplistic, but just start believing things that you didn't believe before, because beliefs are just thoughts we've practiced over and over. And right now you have a belief that wasting food is bad or wrong. And so we got to attack that and just start practicing new thoughts. Wasting food on my body is not what I want to do. If I eat this food, that will be a waste of time and energy.
Yeah, because you're going to have to work really hard to get it off. I
Right.
mean, if you want to, don't want it on you, and then you're going to beat yourself up. You're either
Mm-hmm.
going to have to over exercise or undereat and get this whole vicious cycle started all over again.
Right. When we're eating to enough, to our comfortable fullness, and there's food still left on the plate, we just got to start being okay with looking at that food and not needing to eat it. It is a big challenge, but just making the decision that you're not going to eat past your fullness cues, that's really the start. But yeah, I just recommend leaving 2 bites behind and just practicing looking at it and being like, this is okay. Nothing has gone wrong. The house didn't get struck by lightning. Like your brain is like, tragedy will strike. Like your brain is so dramatic. It's hilarious, honestly, when we listen to what the thoughts our brain offers us. But like really throw away 2 bites and see that nothing bad happened. That's a really good first
Yeah,
step.
I think that's a great rule. Now, what about people that have the binge, like how you were talking? The binge, get rid of, the binge, get rid of. What are they really doing?
So if we're talking about like
Yeah,
each day,
emotional.
they're yeah, emotional eating. So a lot of times that the binging or overeating comes from restriction beforehand. So usually that's what's happening prior to, whether you've been restricting for days and weeks and months on end, and then comes an overeat cycle, or more typically it's restricting during the week and then overeating on the weekend. And so many of us don't consider the overeating that we're doing a full binge because we think, oh, well, I don't like binge and purge, or I'm not eating entire chocolate cakes in one sitting. But if we're overeating to severe discomfort, then you might consider that a binge. And usually, like I said, that is coming after a restriction cycle. So what's happening in the brain there is that you're restricting and saying, I can't have this. You're probably in some food labeling. This food is bad. This food is off limits. And so when your brain gets the opportunity to have it, it's like, well, I better eat it all because we don't get this very often. And that's really coming from a DNA perspective. Honestly, like it comes from the way we are built from from an evolutionary standpoint. So if you think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors, like way back, when they would come upon a field of berries, they would binge. They would eat as much as they can because that was their greatest source of sugar. And so that would put weight on. That would keep, they knew that that would be a lot of energy, concentrated energy. That was the best they could do for concentrated sugar, right? And so they would eat as much as they possibly could. Well, now we've taken those berries, concentrated them down, added them to concentrated flour, and served them up in a strawberry shortcake, right? And now we get a concentrated amount of dopamine when we eat that. And so our brain is like, oh, this is very essential for survival. So it's only natural that we eat a lot of it because our brains, from an evolutionary standpoint, are trained to eat a lot of those things that keep us alive. And so when we restrict them, it feels like they're scarce, like they're that field of berries that we don't come upon very often. And so we restrict, restrict, restrict. And then when we see it, we're like, oh, good, we can finally eat that thing. And then we overeat it. So one of the keys is just to allow all foods all the time, because when it's not on restriction, you can actually make the decision if you want to eat it or not. Is today the day I would like to eat a donut? Do I want to eat that? Is that going to fit in my plan? Do I really feel like that? Do I want to include the sluggishness that's going to come after that? Like, I can eat it if I choose. From that point, we're able to make the decision to not eat it if it doesn't fit in, or to allow it and then adjust what we're eating accordingly. Does that make sense? Because when we're restricting, it's almost always, research shows, is going to lead to an overeat later. So true food freedom really comes from allowing all foods and then making the choice of what feels good today.
Now, I think that can be true, but like when I do fasting, I definitely am, like I'm cleaning out my body. It's a whole process and a whole plan. So I'm going 2 days with just the water and some cinnamon tea or whatever is, and then I'm adding in as I go. And I don't have that binging because it is planned out.
For sure. Yeah. Which is a totally different.
It's different when you
Yeah.
are restricting. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, it's almost like you're punishing yourself. You're restricting, restricting, and then your brain wants a reward. So then you eat that thing that you were holding back. And
a planned fast is for sure different than just saying, I can't have this. I'm restricting this because I'm on a diet.
And like, I also have, I go on planned eating. And I do know what you mean. Like, if you've really restricted something, maybe it's an essential ingredient. Maybe you took all your carbs out.
Right.
And your brain needs it to function. So your body is like, I need some carbs. And so I think, though, on something that is healthy and planned, like somebody else might think what I was eating was restrictive by looking at it by what they're actually eating now. Like, what are they eating? Like, look at what they're eating. Oh, they're eating everything processed. So they would feel restricted when I'm like, oh no, more processed food.
Yeah. And I think it just, as far as when you're talking about it's a lifestyle, you got to make one small change a day, or not every single day, but like one small change at a time is really what I meant to say. One small change at a time is how you get to lifestyle change. So start with the things that are easy swaps. Is it an easy swap for you to switch out your, chips for like salty pickles? Like, if you're looking for something salty, is that an easy swap for you? If you're like, no, I hate pickles, like, okay, what is the thing that's an easy swap for you? What's the easiest thing? And let's just level up one thing at this meal. Is it an easy swap for you to go from a high sugar yogurt to a Greek yogurt that's going to be high protein? Is that an easy swap for you? Yes. Then do that. And so you just start with those things that are easy swaps instead of like eliminating all processed foods at one time. And you'll eventually get there as you start to make those swaps. I had a client actually that just this morning that she was like telling me about her schedule and how on particular days with work, she ends up going from like 11 to 6 without eating just because of the way her schedule is. And she's like, I used to just want to stop for a hamburger and I don't even think that way anymore. Like, it's not even appealing to me. And that's what happens as you're slowly making these changes, is the things that you used to eat on a regular basis, like it doesn't even sound good to her anymore, because she's just like, I know the way I feel after I eat that, and I don't want that anymore. And So as you're making these changes, you'll be surprised.
Yeah, like also, I think I can look back and remember when I started on being on the healthier side and eating like a lifestyle. It doesn't, you don't do it all at once. Usually
No.
it's a learning process, and you have to give yourself some grace and some time to learn what healthy things do I like. What uh I really have this, I really like chocolate. So what could I have when I'm wanting chocolate that would be fine to have and not as detrimental to my health, or just the fact that I like feeling good in my clothes? And what are the things that I can eat that I enjoy on my new lifestyle? It takes you a while to figure that out. You don't get all of the science together and all of the, perfect eating all aligned when you first start. I mean, some people do go cold turkey, but I think it's easier to just build habits along the way. And
Mhm.
you talk about your higher brain versus your lower brain when it comes to habits and making food choices. What
Mhm.
is that all about?
So your higher brain is the human part that can plan. It's the part that can think about our future goals, whether that's just for tomorrow or in 10 years. The lower brain is the part that just wants to be satisfied right now. The the things that we do from our lower brain are our habits. So anytime your brain can delegate a task down to the lower brain, it will do that because it's efficient. So for example, if you think about brushing your teeth, you don't actually use your higher brain to think through the entire process because it's such a habit that you can delegate that down to your lower brain and be like scrolling your phone at the same time, right? Because you don't really have to think so much about it. It's like you get home, you pull in your driveway and you're like, did I even pass by the park? Because it's almost like you're, on autopilot. We say that a lot, like, oh, I was just on autopilot. That's tasks being delegated down to your lower brain. When we delegate our eating down to our lower brain, a couple of things have happen. Number one, we get mindless eating. This is where we pass through the kitchen and realize we have a handful of grapes in our mouth before we even noticed. It's where we are talking to our coworker and all of a sudden you're 25 M&Ms in from the bowl on their counter and you're like, "Oh, I forgot they have candy here on their counter all the time." And it's just my habit mindlessly to eat. Mindless eating happens when we're doing something else like watching TV. You get through an entire bag of chips because you weren't paying attention. So that's all eating done from our habit brain because our brains don't really have to think about it so much. You also get emotional eating down in in that lower brain because the lower brain is like something's wrong. We're having this emotion that we don't like. It's uncomfortable, whether it's boredom or stress or frustration or disappointment. And so your brain is like, how can we solve for this uncomfortable emotion? And it's like, oh, you know what we've done in the past? We've eaten. And that helps for this emotion to be tampered down. And that comes from the lower brain. And so we eat in order to tamp down that emotion. So we want to bring all of our eating and eating choices up to our higher brain because this is the part we can think through. We can enjoy the food that we're eating. We can think about how much we're chewing, think about the food, think about the flavor, and think about our hunger and fullness cues. So we want to use our higher brain as we're eating. Just take some breaths, pay attention to the food, give thanks for it, however you do that before you start eating, and really pay attention while you're eating. The other thing you can do to use your higher brain is to plan. Because when you write down a plan, I have my clients write down what they're going to eat for the day. We don't use a diet app or amounts or count calories or macros or anything. I just have them write down. I'm going to have oatmeal and yogurt for breakfast. I'm going to have a salad with chicken for lunch. And I'm going to have salmon, rice, and broccoli for dinner. Like that's all they need to write down. And then we have used our higher brain to make our food decisions. And also, by the way, if you decide that you want chocolate that day, you write that down ahead too. Because if you write down, I'm also going to have, 6 Cadbury mini eggs. I love those things at this time of year. You write that down and then you have that, it builds so much trust for yourself. Because what happens is when you write down 6 Cadbury eggs and then you eat 6 Cadbury eggs, and I'm talking about like those mini eggs, by the way, the little tiny ones. Not like
Yeah,
the big
not the
giant
big
ones. Yeah. um,
That's what popped in my head when you first said it. I was like,
you're like, wow. Whatever you're writing down. The thing is when you say, this is what I'm going to eat, and then you eat that, we start to believe ourselves. We start to believe that I do what I say I'm going to do. And it just builds so much trust to use your higher brain, plan what you're going to eat, and then eat that. You're like, what? I do what I say I'm going to do, because we're the first ones we cancel on every time,
And I always have my clients, if they're going to have a cheat, I always tell them I want us to plan the cheat,
Mm-hmm.
because then it's still like discipline. Like you said, on this day, I'm having my chocolate brownie with walnuts or whatever it is you like. And then you really don't beat yourself up. Because you're like, I planned that. I had that. I
Right.
got what I wanted. And like, then it isn't like this where people feel like, oh gosh, I fell off. I've failed. I might as well throw everything away because of, I've
Right.
fallen off.
Exactly.
And
And it's about the language you use. It's not really
yeah,
everyone uses different language, but for me, that's not a quote unquote cheat, because it's part of the plan.
it's part of the plan. It was part
Part of
of
the
your
plan.
plan. And that's why
Yeah.
I like people to make it a part of their plan and not to completely never have something that they want.
Right.
You can certainly have some things that you want. And of course you can eat all that you want, but you know what I mean. If I
Right.
have people wanting certain results, I'm like, you can still have the results and have your brownie, but you have planned it into your routine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really like that you were making me laugh when you were talking about higher brain, lower brain, because I am so sure I was using my lower brain this morning at 5:30 or 5:15 a.m. when I'm going to work, and I know the road is closed, so why did I go down that way?
Yeah,
Because it's the lower brain that took over on autopilot. Or when
absolutely.
I'm doing a workout and I've taught umpteen classes, I forget, did I just do that? Or did you guys see me do that? Like, did I just do box jumps? Did I just
Yeah.
do this? And because I'm literally operating on with the lower brain on autopilot. And I think we do that so much.
Yeah. And I mean, how many times have you like found yourself with a handful of candy or chips or whatever, and you're like, oh, I don't even remember like starting this. I don't remember making the conscious choice to eat this thing. So another way we can really employ the higher brain to make our food decisions is to just decide right now that you're only going to eat when you're sitting down at the table, or you're only going to eat when you have like from a plate and fork or from a bowl, because that will help you prevent you from just grabbing things on your way through kitchens or break rooms or your coworker's desk. I find those little like grabs are kind of a lot of the culprits of the mindless eating. So just deciding like, I just don't eat unless I'm sitting down at the table.
Yeah, because then it's bad because it's mindless, and you
Yeah.
could eat so much mindlessly. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
watching a show, you could just eat a whole bag of chips and then you're like, did I eat all that? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just being more mindful about your environment, setting the mood. Maybe you put candles out and you play some music so that other parts of you are getting fed, because sometimes I don't think we're actually, when we're eating, it isn't all about just the food. And
Mm-hmm.
if you could have some of these other senses being fed, it feels complete.
Mm.
You know, like if you've got the
Mhm.
music, you've got like the candles, you're sitting down to dinner, you're eating, you're savoring your bites. That's
Mhm.
so different from what we saw in Bad Moms, where she's got the spaghetti and she's in a hurry and trying to eat and get the kids somewhere and it flies all over the car. And I know
Yeah.
so many of us could relate to that.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, just working with what works for your lifestyle too, but just being mindful of what you're eating and planning ahead will go a long way. And like I said, just especially with trust in yourself, because how many times are you like, oh, I just got to start over? Well, it's partly because you're canceling on yourself. You're like, I didn't do what I said I was going to do. So just starting to write down a plan and make it easy the first day, by the way, make it really, 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 really easy to follow and start building that trust.
And yeah, and the more you feel successful, like when you're doing something that actually makes you feel successful, you stick to it.
Yeah.
It's when we make things too difficult to stick to and we feel like failures.
Hmm.
It's really building yourself up to win. So I've really, really enjoyed having you on today, giving all your fresh perspectives for people, a lot of food for thought and
Hmm.
our higher brain. And so thank you so much, Lisa, for your I think, a little bit of a different perspective today.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And where can everybody reach you on social media and get in touch with you? Do you have a website?
Yeah. So my website is well with Lisa, WELL with Lisa.com. And my Instagram is well_with_Lisa. You can also listen to my podcast. It's called Eat Well, Think Well, Live Well. And I cover each of those pillars so that we're eating well, thinking about it, and then making our lives amazing. And that lifestyle piece also includes things like exercise, sleep, and all of the other aspects that we want to do with our lives. So that's where you can find me.
Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode. Make sure to leave a review so that we get noticed in iTunes and other people share the podcast so other people can get some of these great tips. And as always, keep on keeping on, everyone.